What if I told you a king rotted alive on his throne, his body decaying while he still ruled a mighty empire? Henry VIII, the notorious Tudor king, endured a gruesome end, with festering ulcers so vile the stench made courtiers turn away in disgust. Here's the grim kicker. During his funeral procession, gases from his decomposing body caused his lead-lined coffin to burst open, a horrifying final chapter. But was this just illness, or did contemporaries suspect foul play in his sudden decline? Hang on, because this story starts way before the rot sets in. Let's rewind to the days when Henry VIII was the shining star of Europe, a king who seemed to have it all. You wouldn't believe the transformation this man underwent, going from a golden idol to a grotesque shadow of his former self. In his early reign, Henry was the picture of perfection, tall, striking, and full of life. He dominated the jousting field with raw power, thrilling crowds with every charge, and his charm could win over anyone at court. Imagine a ruler so captivating that foreign ambassadors wrote home about him in awe, describing a true Renaissance prince who embodied strength and charisma. Picture the Tudor court in those vibrant early years, alive with energy as Henry's presence filled every room. At over 6 feet tall, he stood head and shoulders above most, his athletic frame a testament to his active life. But it wasn't just his looks. His sharp mind impressed just as much, engaging in debates that left scholars nodding. Everyone adored him, from nobles to visitors from afar. Yet, something changed as the years rolled on. By his 40s, that radiant king had faded, replaced by a man whose temper could ignite without warning, casting a chill over the once warm court. Imagine the shift in atmosphere at Whitehall or Hampton Court, where laughter and cheers once echoed. Now you'd hear only cautious murmurs. Henry's bright spirit, the kind that used to draw people in, turned dark and erratic, making even his closest allies tread lightly. One minute he might crack a smile, the next he'd lash out with a fury that could cost you your head. It was like watching a beloved figure morph into someone unrecognizable, and the people around him could sense the storm brewing beneath the surface. Here's a tidbit from history. Early on, ambassadors couldn't stop praising Henry, calling him the ideal ruler who blended brains with brawn. But later, those same observers noted a troubling edge, a king whose moods swung dangerously, sometimes with deadly consequences. Their letters capture a slow unraveling, a man slipping from greatness into something far more sinister. It wasn't just age creeping up, something broke in him during the 1530s, a turning point that left even his friends struggling to understand who he'd become. Historical accounts often point to a brutal jousting accident in 1536, as the moment everything changed. Henry was thrown from his horse, crushed under its weight, and knocked unconscious for hours. Some believe this trauma altered him, turning the once generous ruler into a paranoid tyrant. His personality shifted dramatically. Gone was the jovial king, replaced by cruelty and suspicion. Relationships soured, betrayals mounted, and the court became a place of fear rather than celebration. What could shatter a man so celebrated and turn him into a figure of dread? Think about this. Henry's downfall wasn't just in his mind. His body soon began to betray him in ways that would horrify anyone. As his temper grew uglier, so did the state of his health, setting the stage for a decline that would turn even the strongest stomach. Stick with me, because we're about to uncover how this once mighty king became a prisoner to his own failing flesh. Let's step into the grim reality of Henry VIII's later years, where his body turned into a battlefield of decay and torment. By the 1540s, this once mighty king was a walking catastrophe. His physical decline so severe, it shocked everyone at court. His legs in particular became a horrifying sight, covered in festering ulcers that oozed pus and rotting flesh, creating a stench so vile that courtiers pressed perfumed handkerchiefs to their faces just to endure his presence. These weren't mere scratches. They transformed a ruler who once charged across jousting fields into an object of pity and disgust. Picture yourself in a grand palace hall, surrounded by splendor, yet gagging on the smell of infection that no amount of luxury could mask. The extent of Henry's suffering is hard to fathom. Those leg wounds caused such excruciating pain that he was often bedridden for days, unable to perform even basic tasks. The man who once led hunts and dazzled crowds could barely stand without grimacing. Historical accounts, like those from the Spanish ambassador Chapuis, describe his legs as the worst in the world, a brutal testament to how unbearable it was for everyone nearby. Servants dreaded tending to him so much that they drew straws to decide who'd face the ordeal of dressing him, treating it as a punishment. Imagine the dread of approaching a king, not out of fear of his temper, but because of the sheer horror of his condition. Research ties these chronic venous ulcers to a mix of old injuries and lifestyle factors. That devastating jousting accident in 1536, where Henry was crushed under his horse and knocked unconscious for hours, likely started the damage with crush injuries to his legs. Without proper medical care, infections took hold and festered over the years, worsened by his growing immobility. On top of that, his obesity played a cruel role. His waistline swelled from 32 inches in youth to 54 inches by his death, with a weight of around 28 stone. Every step became a struggle, the strain on his body intensifying the decay. You can almost see him dragging himself through court with bandaged legs that hid nothing of the rot beneath. Now, let's add another layer to this nightmare. Henry's eating habits fueled his downfall, packing in about 5,000 calories a day, double what an active man needs. Think whole roasted pigs, multiple chickens, heaps of bread, and endless wine at every meal, with his kitchens preparing over 800 dishes daily for him to sample. Even exotic fare like swan and oysters, believed to hold magical properties, filled his table. This gluttony piled on weight, crushing his already failing frame and speeding up his body's collapse. It's staggering to think a king with such power could be so trapped by his own excesses. Here's the haunting part. As Henry's body rotted, he didn't just sit idly by and suffer. Desperate for relief from the pain and decay, he turned to solutions that might shock you just as much as his condition. Stick around, because we're about to explore the wild and often terrifying measures he took in a bid to reclaim even a sliver of his former strength. Let's peel back the curtain on the bizarre world of 16th century medicine and see how Henry VIII's desperate attempts to heal himself often did more harm than good. You wouldn't believe the kind of stuff they thought passed for treatment back then. And Henry was right in the middle of it, playing doctor to his own decaying body. In an era when medical knowledge was more guesswork than science, the solutions were as horrifying as the ailments, and this king's obsession with fixing himself led to some truly grim experiments. Picture Henry in his private chambers at Hampton Court, surrounded by jars of herbs and strange powders, trying to outsmart the rot eating away at his legs. He wasn't just relying on court physicians. He had his own medical recipe book, known as Sloane MS 1047, now preserved in the British Library. This wasn't a casual hobby. It's packed with nearly 200 remedies, many crafted or tweaked by Henry himself. One standout is his Pusset ointment, meant for those festering skin sores. It mixed chamomile flowers and rose leaves with dangerous stuff like lithorge of gold, a lead compound, and other toxic bits like mercury in some recipes. Smearing this on open wounds wasn't healing. It was likely poisoning him bit by bit, irritating the sores and slowing any chance of recovery. Imagine the scene: servants grinding these ingredients into a gritty paste while Henry, wincing from pain, waits for the next supposed cure. He'd watch them slather it onto his raw, oozing legs, hoping for relief, but probably just making the infections worse. Without any grasp of germs or proper wound care, even the most well-meaning treatments turned into disasters. The use of lead and mercury wasn't rare back then, but on a body already breaking down, it was like pouring fuel on a fire. You can almost smell the metallic tang of that ointment, a mix of false hope and hidden danger, as it's applied day after painful day. Now, let's not forget Henry didn't just tinker with potions. He tried to shape the whole medical world around him. He founded the Royal College of Physicians in 1518 and merged the Barbers' Company with the Guild of Surgeons in 1540. He even pushed through 7 laws to license practitioners, rules so sturdy they stood for centuries. But no amount of royal decrees could fix the fact that medicine back then leaned on wild ideas like balancing the 4 humors or peeking at star charts for diagnoses. Doctors might study a patient's urine to pick a cure, which sounds as reliable as flipping a coin. Henry's efforts were bold, but the knowledge just wasn't there. Here's the brutal truth. These medieval treatments didn't just fail, they likely sped up his body's collapse. Applying toxic substances to already ravaged flesh could have deepened infections and piled on the misery. Historical accounts paint a man trapped in a vicious cycle, where every attempt at a cure dug him deeper into suffering. It's hard to imagine a king with so much power being so helpless against his own failing health. Stick with me, because there's more to this story that might make you question what really brought him down. Let's turn our attention to a chilling possibility that haunted Henry VIII's court in his final years. What if his horrific decline wasn't just the work of illness or failed treatments, but something far more sinister? We're talking about whispers of poison and dark secrets that swirled around the Tudor palaces, fueled by a specific incident that shook everyone to their core. In the 1530s, as Henry's health crumbled and his temper grew ever more volatile, the fear of betrayal wasn't just in his mind. It was a threat he took deadly seriously. Picture a king who once inspired awe, now hunched over in pain, eyeing every servant and noble with suspicion. Henry's paranoia wasn't baseless. He pushed through brutal laws to shield himself, including a 1531 Act of Parliament that branded poisoning as treason, punishable by being boiled alive. That's the kind of terror he felt about someone slipping a fatal dose into his food or drink. Imagine sitting at a lavish banquet in Whitehall, surrounded by flickering candles and trays of roasted meats. Yet every bite feels like a gamble. Could that goblet of wine or spoonful of stew hide a silent killer? For Henry, trust was a luxury he couldn't afford. Now, let's zero in on why this fear gripped him so tightly. In 1531, a cook named Richard Roos was accused of poisoning porridge served to Bishop John Fisher's household, an act that killed 2 people. Henry's response was swift and merciless. Roos was boiled alive in a public spectacle, a gruesome warning to anyone daring to plot against the king or his allies. The Spanish ambassador, Eustace Chapuis, wrote with skepticism about the incident, noting the lack of a proper trial and suggesting Henry might have exaggerated the crime to distract from his tense relations with Fisher and the Boleyn family. It wasn't just punishment. It was a message carved in fear, showing how deeply Henry dreaded betrayal. Imagine the atmosphere at court after that execution. Every meal became a potential death sentence, every servant a possible threat. Chapuis observed how the rushed justice fueled murmurs and unease, with some questioning what was really behind the king's extreme reaction. Was Henry genuinely convinced poison lurked around every corner, or was he using such cases to intimidate enemies? You can almost feel the tension in those grand halls, where even a king's power couldn't shield him from the specter of treachery. It paints a picture of a man haunted by shadows, whether real or imagined. Here's the lingering thought. The Roos case wasn't just a one-off. It reflected a broader pattern in Henry's reign, where harsh laws and swift punishments became tools to crush any hint of disloyalty. With rivals both outside his kingdom and within his own walls, every ache or sudden illness could spark suspicion. You start to wonder how a man with so much control could feel so vulnerable. It's a haunting idea that adds a layer of mystery to his tragic end. Stick around because we're about to uncover one final gruesome detail from Henry's story that will leave you stunned. Let's wrap up this grim journey with one last haunting detail about Henry VIII's final chapter. Here's the conclusion to his tragic tale, a moment after his death that's as shocking as his life. During his funeral procession from London to Windsor Castle in 1547, his lead-lined coffin couldn't contain the decompositional gases from his swollen body. As Chalmers Medical Research notes, the pressure caused it to burst open, spilling his remains and forcing servants to clean the mess amid an unbearable stench that overwhelmed even seasoned doctors. If this story of decay and downfall hooked you, hit that like button and subscribe for more history. Let's keep exploring the complex legacy of a king whose reign was as monumental as his ruin.